After completing my 10th class exams in 1979, my father suggested that I go and help my father's uncle and learns astrology. Mathematics being my favorite subject, I learned the calculations. My grandfather taught me how to calculate the inclinations of each planet and how to calculate the lagna and the meridian center MC, and he gave me some birth charts to draw. Thus, I learned how to draw the birth charts first and showed interest in predictions. So, my grandfather told me some predictions, some of the tips that he usually uses for predictions. And after learning those tips, I documented some of them. I verified with my father. While my father and my grandfather have laid the foundation for me to get interested in astrology for almost a decade or 2 decades, I didn't show any interest. Let us now start analyzing this first example, the first female chart. When you look at the chart, the native was born in September 11, 1979. The lagna is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the sixth house from Aries. So the lagna is Virgo. So when Virgo is the lagna lord is Mercury. Just keep that in mind. Now let's start looking at the multiple planets. In which house are the multiple planets? Multiple planets are in the 12th house from Rashi Lagna. That means where you see Mercury, Saturn, Jupiter, Sun, Venus, and Rahu. All of them are there. So let's start with each planet. Saturn is the lord of the 5th and 6th houses. Venus is the lord of the 2nd and 9th houses. Jupiter is the lord of the 4th and 7th houses. Sun is the lord of the 12th house. So the 12th house lord is residing in its own house. Mercury is the Lagnadipati and the lord of the 10th house, Dasadipati. So you see the most important lords are all co-joined in the 12th house along with the 12th house lord Sun. Now that we have seen what planets are there in the 12th house, let's try to see the relationship between them. First of all, when you look at it, the first step that you have to do is to, when you have multiple planets, what you do is to look for the Graha Yuddha, means planetary war. When Saturn is a part of the multiple planets, then by default, according to planetary war rules, Saturn is the winner. So Saturn is now ruling the 12th house, even though the ruler is Sun. Remember, Saturn and Sun are bitter enemies. So, and Sun is inside the 12th house. So Saturn is ruling the 12th house, and the 12th house lord is inside the 12th house, and the 12th house lord is the bitter enemy to Saturn. So that 12th house got completely spoiled. The 12th house lord got spoiled. Those are the two things that you have to keep in mind. Next, we start looking at what is the relationship between Saturn, because Saturn is the Lord Grahayuddha, winner of the planetary war. Let's try to see what's the relationship between Saturn and other planets. First of all, Rahu is a catalyst to Saturn. So by default, whatever Saturn does it, Rahu just adds it to it. So let's start looking at it. Friends, who are Saturn's friend? As I said, Rahu is a catalyst to Saturn, so Rahu is a friend to Saturn. Apart from that, Venus is a friend to Saturn too, and Venus is the 2nd and 9th house lord. So a friend is residing In second and ninth house, Lord Venus is residing in a house afflicted and spoiled by the 12th house Lord and ruled by Saturn. Now let's go and look at the enemies. Saturn's bitter enemy is Sun. Sun is the lord of the 12th house and residing in the 12th house. Another thing is Saturn's enemy is Jupiter. Jupiter is the lord of the 4th and 7th houses. Now, having said all these things, let's go and try just by looking at this planet. What is the outcome? What could be the outcome? When you look at it, first of all, because of the bitter enemy between Saturn and Sun, the 12th house got spoiled. Okay. Now Rahu is residing there, so the 12th house is volatile and very dynamic. Jupiter, the lord of the 4th and 7th house, is residing in a spoiled house and co-joined with a bitter enemy Saturn. So the lord got spoiled. So you have an issue with 4th house lord and 7th house lord. As if that is not sufficient, you have Mercury, who is a neutral, Lagnadipati, self, is also there. So when you look all these, the 12th house, how just because of one major planet, the whole 12th house got spoiled and all the planets are residing in that house are either afflicted or the weakened. Now when you go and look at the Bhiruga Sarala Paddhati rules, Saturn is, as I said, is ruling now, is the emperor of the 12th house, because that's where Saturn is residing. Now Saturn, because it is ruling in the 12th house, it spoils the 1st house. Okay. So remember, Saturn is spoiling the 1st house and 1st house lord Mercury is co-joined with Saturn. So the house is being spoiled, but Saturn is still residing with Mercury. And then Saturn's third aspect is on the 2nd house. That's the Venus lord. So that's a positive thing there, is the 2nd house. And Saturn's 7th aspect is on the 6th house, that is owned by Saturn itself. 6th house is the employment conditions, debts and illnesses. And Saturn's 10th aspect is on the 9th house, 12, 11, 10. Yes, the 10th aspect is on the 9th house, owned by Venus. So the advantage here of the Saturn's aspect is that Saturn's direct aspect is on its own house. Saturn's 3rd and 10th aspect is on the house owned by Venus, and Venus is a friend of Saturn and Venus is co-joined with Saturn. So when you look at the chart, what you can understand is that the 2nd, the 9th and the 6th houses, all these 3 houses are safe. And Saturn is ruling the 12th house, and the 12th house got spoiled. So you got a spoiled 12th house, you got a spoiled 1st house, you got a spoiled lord for 4th and 7th houses. Just keep those things in mind. Now let's go and see what's the status of the other planets, so the other way to predict it. Now that we had seen the explanation about the planets in the 12th house, let's look at it in a graphical format to see who is strong. If you look at the graphical format, means the graphical format that I did is for each planet, all the 12 in the 12th house, I took their inclination and drew it in the house. In that house, who is close to whom. What you can see is that Venus is here, is above. So the next one for Saturn, the closest is behind the Saturn, the closest one is Venus, and a little bit farther is Mercury and the Sun. But if you look at the inclinations, the Mercury, Sun and Saturn, all the 3 are very close to each other. So if you see it, Saturn is 23, Sun is 24, Mercury is 22 degrees. So that means all the 3 are very close to each other. Remember, Saturn has bitter enemy with the Sun, that is the 12th house lord. So when these 2 enemies are started close enough, the impact on the 12th house lord is very high, indicating that the 12th house is irreparable. It cannot be repaired at all. As if that is not enough, well, you can see here Mercury, the first house lord, is also very close to Saturn. Even though Mercury is a neutral for Saturn, according to BSP rules, Saturn has already spoiled the first house, which is owned by Mercury. So, the owner lord is staying in this house and Saturn is spoiling the house, first house. The next one that you got to see is Venus. Venus is a friend to Saturn. So, the positive side is Venus owns second and ninth houses, and Saturn's third aspect is on second house and 10th aspect is on ninth house. So, those two houses are very safe. Just keep in mind, I will tell you the reason why later. And Rahu, as I said, Rahu is a friend, and Rahu is in front of, very close to Saturn too, but not that close enough. It's almost like 10 degrees difference. So, whatever Saturn does it, Rahu's being a catalyst and a friend might help Saturn to do whatever it wants to do, but not that, the help won't be that much, because there is a 10-degree inclination between Rahu and Saturn. Now that I had given you the explanation about the Saturn, the impact of all the 5 planets, let's see this one more time, the relationship with Saturn. As I said, the enemy is Sun and Mercury, Jupiter. Mercury is a neutral, Saturn is neutral, Rahu and Venus are the friends. So, how did the impact result into? Because the Sun and Jupiter are the enemies, that means that for this particular NATO, the 12th house lord, which is the pleasures of bed, is spoiled. The 4th house is home life environment, which is completely spoiled. 7th house, which is the marriage or Kalatrasthanam, that got spoiled. So, the NATO has no opportunity to get, the NATO is remained as unmarried. The reason is because of the Sun and Jupiter being spoiled by co-joining with Saturn. Now, the next one is Mercury, because Saturn has spoiled the first house, and the first house lord Mercury is is in the house owned by a house where Saturn is residing. The NATO, the Dhanusthanam self, the NATO has lost the desire to have confidence, self-confidence, something similar to that one. The NATO has lost something similar to that, is called as a self-confidence. So, these are the 3 things that you have to look at it. The next one is the friends. Now, look at Rahu. Rahu is a friend to Saturn, so whatever Saturn does it, he will do it. Saturn, look at, so what is Saturn? Saturn is the lord of the 5th and 6th houses. 5th house is higher education. So, Saturn has to do something pertaining to higher education good. Saturn has to do something good pertaining to higher education. I checked with the NATO, and the NATO had a master's MSc, Masters in Sciences, and the NATO had a MEd degree. So, the NATO has 2 master's degrees from India, and the NATO is working right now as a teacher. Remember, the 5th and 6th house lord is Saturn. So, Saturn, whatever the 5th house he gives it, he tries to make it as an employment condition similar to that one. And then when you look at it, the 10th house lord is Mercury. Mercury is a neutral here with Saturn when it compares to Saturn. So, even though Saturn has given all the education, the Saturn made sure that the NATO has a career. The employment conditions and the career is Mercury. Because of that, the NATO has a job as of now. The only disadvantages and also I want to tell you here is that Venus, look at Venus. Venus is a 2nd house lord, that is the Dhanasthana Adhipati. So, because Venus is a friend to Saturn, the NATO had no issue, because the NATO has a stable job, and because she is working, she has some sort of a financial earnings, and that itself tells that the NATO has no financial problems. And the most important thing I want to tell you here is, look at the 9th house from Rashi Lagna, where that is the Venus, and the 9th house is the 2nd house from Moon. So, Dharmasthanamu and Kutumbasthanamu for Moon. That's the reason why from Moon also the NATO is having a stable Moon. Venus is the 2nd house lord, that is the Dhanasthana Adhipati. So, whether you see from the Rashi Lagna or the Chandra Lagna, the Dhanasthana Adhipati is still Venus, and Venus is residing with a friend Saturn, and they both are residing in the 12th house. That's the reason why you see the native having a stable income and a good education. The only problem the native has is pertaining with fourth house, seventh house, and the 12th house, which is nothing but which has a direct relationship to marriage and marital life. I hope my explanation for multiple planets is enough to understand how when you have more than one planet to 4 planets, how the impact will be. I'll give you another example and gives us in the second example where Saturn is still a part of the multiple planets. Let me explain to you that which is a different situation for this that native. Now that we have analyzed the chart, let me go and try to predict this particular native. How would be the year 2018? The reason why I want to show this is because I want to explain how when you have these multiple planets in the same house, how can the prediction, how should one predict? So when you see the Vamsottaridasa for this native, it is Rahu Mahadasa running all the way till 2020, and now the coming is the Moon Antardasa, and to be more precise, the Rahu Sabantardasa is from February 2018. So, or you can say it as Mars Pratyantardasa starting. So the Moon Pratyantardasa will end by December. So what we got to do is, how is the moon? We know that Rahu is in the 12th house looking at the 6th house. So generally speaking, usually when the Rahu Mahadasa begins for any native, and if the native is in a age at an appropriate age to get married, then Rahu Mahadasa will always support it. That's what I keep hearing. I read in some books, but I can't exactly guarantee that one. So for this native, because Rahu is in the 12th house, let me assume that there is a possibility for the native to get married during the Rahu Mahadasa, even though the Mahadasa started in 2002. Until now the native hasn't got married. So that tells you that even though the Mahadasa is supporting, there's a number of other reasons why the native was not able to get married. Moon Antardasa, in Moon Antardasa, I don't think anything great will happen, because Moon is the 11th house lord. Moon is in the 8th house. There's nothing great for the moon to do it, so I don't think moon can do anything. But from moon, the 7th house is the second house from Rashi Lagna. So, and the moon second house, from moon the second house lord is again Venus. So the 7th and the second house lord from moon is Venus, and Venus, because it is in the 12th house and Venus is a friend to Saturn, there is a possibility. But we have seen that until now nothing has happened. So I'll be surprised if the native gets married before 2018 January. Now that we have seen that, let's see what are the other possibilities. The other things that I usually do is look at the transit analysis for the year 2018. For this native, let's look at the 3 slow moving planets in the year 2018. In the year 2018, Rahu will be in Cancer. That means the 11th house from Rashi Lagna and the 4th house from Chandra Lagna for this native. Remember, Rahu Mahadasa and Moon Antardasa is running. So, and Rahu is in the 4th house from Moon. And as I told you earlier, during the Rahu Mahadasa, generally there is a possibility for the native to get married. This is the one that might give you a slight possibility for the native, saying that the transit Rahu residing in Cancer might help the native to get think one more time about getting married and have a home life environment. Now that we have seen about the Rahu, hoping that that's a Mahadasa. Now hoping that Rahu might help it, let's go and look at the second slow moving planet, Jupiter. Jupiter will be in Libra. That means the second house from Rashi Lagna and the 7th house from Chandra Lagna. And Jupiter is the 7th house lord from Rashi Lagna. So Jupiter residing there is a positive sign for the native again to have an ability to get married. But here's the reason why it cannot happen. The reason is, first of all, from natal Saturn, the third aspect is on the second house. Remember, that's what we found out earlier. So that's where the transit Jupiter is residing. So whenever there is any sort of a relationship between Saturn and Jupiter, disappointment and hurdles are sure to happen. Now that the transit Jupiter is in the second house from Rashi Lagna and the seventh house from Chandra Lagna, and natal Jupiter is looking at transit Jupiter, there's a possibility for either, if then the marriage is supposed to happen, or while the things are working properly, something happens, and that something might create hurdles or create some disappointments to the native. Now that we have done that, let's go and look at the third slow moving planet, Saturn. The transit Saturn is in the fourth house from Rashi Lagna, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, ninth house from Chandra Lagna. Thank God it's not in the 8th house. Wow. Okay, so the transit Saturn residing in the 4th house, remember, when it resides in the 4th house, it will have a direct, third aspect is on the 6th house, and the direct aspect is on the 10th house where Mars is residing. So 4th house lord is Jupiter. Remember, natal Jupiter is co-joined with natal Saturn in the 12th house. So for sure the Jupiter, because it got spoiled, the houses, it has no control of its own houses. So transit Saturn when residing in the 4th house, Jupiter cannot do anything. So it's one more time transit Saturn ruling the 4th house again. So overall, when I look at the 3 transit planets, and when I look at just the Vimsottari Dasa, then I have a slight indication that there is a possibility for the native to get married. When I look the Vimsottari Dasa with transit Rahu, I would say that the possibility is increasing. When I add transit Jupiter to the analysis, I felt like that whatever the possibilities that the native is seeing might come across some sort of a hurdles and resulting in some sort of disappointments. Now when I add transit Saturn to the chart and do the analysis, I see transit Saturn is controlling the 4th house, which is the home life environment owned by Jupiter, and it's no way letting the 4th house to be stabilized. So overall, the possibility is close to 0 for this particular native when it comes to marriage. That is for sure. There's nothing that can be done. Okay. Let me start explaining the second example where, as I said earlier, it's on the same date, September 11th, 1979. So all the planets are there in Leo. I took the 2 female examples on the same day, and both of them are in India, born in India at different times of the day. So but look at the way how the 2 lives are completely different, just because of the change in the Lagna. Now for this native, the Lagna is Pisces and the Lagnadipati is Jupiter. Jupiter is residing in the 6th house, that is Leo, and Jupiter is the lord of the 1st and the 10th houses. So the 1st house deals with Tanusthanamu, the 10th house is career. So Jupiter is here co-joined with Saturn. The biggest enemy for Jupiter is Saturn, and Jupiter is the lord of the 1st house and 10th house. So just by looking at it, you can say that for this particular native, the 1st house is Tanusthanamu. The native will have very least self-confidence, and then Jupiter being the 10th house lord is career, so the native will have a very volatile career, just because it is co-joined with its bigger enemy Saturn. Now all these are co-joining in the 6th house. 6th house lord is Sun here, and let's go and start with each and every lord. Saturn first is the lord of the 11th and 12th houses. 12th house, you know, it's pleasures of bed. 11th house is house of desires. So when it comes to pleasures of bed or the house of desires, it is ruled by Saturn, governed by Saturn and controlled by Saturn. The next one is Jupiter. Jupiter is the lord of the first and 10th houses. We know that, as I said earlier. Then Sun. Sun is the lord of the 6th house. Then comes Venus. Venus is the lord of the 3rd and 8th houses. Oh, that's okay. It doesn't matter now. And Mercury. Mercury is the lord of the 7th and 4th houses. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mercury is the lord of the 7th and 4th houses. Oh, great. Now, just look at it. The bitter enemy for Saturn is Jupiter and Sun. So, Jupiter is the 1st house and 10th house lord. Sun is the 6th house lord. So, 6th house deals with illness, deaths and unemployment conditions. So, when Jupiter got spoiled, which is career, and Sun got spoiled because of Saturn, that means the NATO has a dynamic employment career path, because the 10th house lord career is spoiled, 6th house lord Sun is got spoiled, which deals with employment conditions. So one thing, by just by looking at it, you can say that the career and the employment conditions are very challenging for this NATO. Now let's go back and look at the other situations for this NATO and how the other planets are impacting this NATO's life. Let's go and look at that one too. Let's start for this particular NATO the inclinations to see which planet is closer to Saturn and which planet is farther from Saturn. When you look at it, for this NATO, the closest one is Venus is ahead of it because it's above Saturn when you're in the chart. So for Saturn, the closest one, as I said earlier, is Sun, Mercury, and Sun and Mercury are very close to Saturn. So whatever the impact will be for Sun and Mercury will be the highest one. Jupiter is behind Saturn, so the impact will be minimal. Means you can see ups and downs, but not a major impact to notice it. Venus, who is ahead of Saturn, because it is a friend, you won't see any major changes there. And Rahu is just a friend to Saturn, so whatever Saturn does it, Rahu just adds as a catalyst. So overall, when you look at the graph, what you can say is that whatever the role that Sun and Mercury are going to play for this NATO, that particular roles will be very, very chaotic. And whatever the role that Jupiter plays for this particular NATO is a dynamic, like it has a lot of ups and downs for this particular NATO. So let's see who is the Sun. Sun is the lord of the 6th house, employment conditions, illness and deaths. The next one is Mercury. Mercury is the lord of the 3rd, 7th and 4th houses. 4th houses is a home life environment, 7th house is marriage, and Venus, we don't need to look, you just look at the Sun, that is the 6th house. Okay, so what you can understand from here is when Jupiter got spoiled, as I said earlier, the career will have a dynamic path, and because of that, Mercury being spoiled, the employment conditions changes every now and then. When I mean the employment conditions, it means to say that the NATO will be sometimes employed, sometimes unemployed, or will have an employment which is not encouraging, or will have a very poor employment surrounded with the people who dislike her. All those things are called comes under employment conditions. So the NATO is not going to have a stable or satisfactory employment conditions, that is for sure. Now because Sun, that is because of Sun, and next comes because of Mercury. What is happening is that Mercury is the lord of the 4th and 7th houses. So 4th house is home life environment, so it is always dynamic and unstable home life environment, and the 7th house is marriage. So if the NATO gets married, the marriage will be very volatile and very dynamic, in the sense you never know how the relationship will be with that with her husband. And remember, above all, Saturn is the lord of the 12th and 11th houses. So when anything comes to marriage or marital life, it's Saturn who is controlling it. Saturn being residing in the 6th house will spoil the 7th house for sure, and the 7th house lord is Jupiter, its bitter enemy. So Jupiter, the 7th house lord, is co-joining with Saturn, the bitter enemy, and Saturn is spoiling the 7th house owned by its enemy. So the 7th house is completely spoiled. You don't even need to think further. Now let me go and look at a little bit further before I tell you what exactly is the future, what exactly is happening for this particular native. As I said earlier, for this particular native, the biggest enemies are Sun and Jupiter. Sun is the 6th house lord, Jupiter is the 1st and 10th house lord. So let me go and see what exactly happening to this particular native. This native is first job. The native got her first job in May 2011 and the second job in February 2015, left the second job in December 2015. Look at it, it's the second job she left in less than 1 year, and since January 2016 the native is unemployed. Look at the way the Saturn is handling the situation because of the way that the relationship that it has with Sun and Jupiter. They both being the bitter enemies and they are co-joined with it. And the 10th house, Jupiter being the 10th house lord and Sun being the 6th house lord, the native has no chance of having a stable employment here. And now let's go and look at the other ones, the neutral part of it. Mercury, the 4th and 7th house lord, is neutral. Okay, so something pertaining to the Mercury should be okay. Now let me go and see what it is, because the Mercury is the 4th and 7th house lord. Let's go and look at the native's life. The native got married in June 2010. Okay, and then the native got abandoned by her in-laws in August 2012. So that is disturbance in the home life environment by getting abandoned. And then the native has filed for divorce. She filed for divorce, and in June 2017, just a few months back, the divorce got cancelled because the husband did not agree for the divorce. So the native has got married, don't have a family life because of the 4th house, filed for divorce and failed it. Remember, the 6th house lord, sometimes the 6th house deals with the divorce, and because Sun is an enemy to Saturn and is residing there, Saturn did not let the divorce happen, and now they both are not residing together. That means Saturn, who owns the 11th and house of desires and the 12th pleasures of bed, is now both are missing for this particular native. Look at the way the things are going on when you have this many planets. How chaotic it will be is clearly known, but to identify the chaotic, first and the foremost thing that you have to do is to look at the conduct the Graha Yuddha or planetary warfare and see who is the winner in that planetary warfare. By default, Saturn, any planet that wages a war with Saturn is by default the winner of any Graha Yuddha. So when you see multiple planets and you see Saturn one among them, by default Saturn is a winner, period. So this is how you look at, if you have multiple planets, these are the 3 steps that I follow it. I look at the inclinations to see who is forward, who is behind, and then I look at the house relationship with, if Saturn is there, because Saturn is the winner in the Graha Yuddha, I just try to see what is the relationship with Saturn for all the other planets. In the next example, I'm going to show another multiple planets in a house where Saturn is not there. So that's it, completely you will have an understanding is how one should predict when there is no Saturn in the multiple planet combination. Thank you. Now let's go and look at the second example and analyze what could happen for this particular female native in the year 2018. Remember, this native got married, had some sort of a job, lost the job in January 2016, and got abandoned by her in-laws, filed for divorce, and her divorce request was failed in June 2017. This all happened in 2007 until 2017. So let's go and see what might happen from June 2017 onwards. If you look at the chart, the Vimsottari Dasa for this native is started in June 2017. That's exactly the period when Jupiter Mahadasha started. Her divorce got rejected by the court. So first thing we have to see is what's the importance of this Jupiter here. When the Jupiter Mahadasha started and Jupiter Antardasha started, the divorce failed. She couldn't get it divorce. She couldn't get the divorce that she wants it. So when you look at it, the first house lord is Jupiter, Lagnadipati. The Lagnadipati is residing in the 6th house. Remember, 6th house deals with the divorces. So something happened there and the female couldn't get divorced. Now when you look at it, the 6th house, the first house lord Jupiter is co-joined with Saturn in the 6th house, and according to one of the BSP rules, when Saturn and Jupiter co-joins anywhere, they spoil the bhava of Aries. Aries here is the 2nd house from Rashi Lagna and 12th house from Chandra Lagna. See, that's the reason. So the native could not get divorced, so that means that the native lacks the kutumba sthanamu, the ability to raise a family. The native will lack the pleasures of bed. So if by not letting the divorce happen, the what Saturn and Jupiter together has to spoil the bhava of Aries or Mesha is now you can see it from here onwards. Now that Jupiter Mahadasha started and Jupiter Antardasha started, let's go and see what might happen to this native in the year 2018. We'll start with the slow moving planets as usual. Transit Rahu will be in Cancer in the year 2018. So which is 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th house from Rashi Lagna and the 3rd house from Chandra Lagna. 5th house means when you look from the marriage perspective, children. Rahu residing in the 1st house, in the 5th house, and Moon being the lord of that. I don't exactly say anything great about that 5th house, that is when it comes to it, the ability to have children. Now let me go and look at the transit Jupiter. Transit Jupiter in the year 2018 will be in Libra, which is the 7th and 8th house from Rashi Lagna, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th house from Chandra Lagna. Oh my gosh. So 6th house from Chandra Lagna and 8th house from Rashi Lagna. But if you look at it, transit's natal Saturn's 3rd aspect is on Libra. Remember, natal Saturn's 3rd aspect is on Libra. That's where transit Jupiter is residing, and transit Jupiter's direct aspect is on Mesha or Aries. So while natal Saturn and natal Jupiter have spoiled the bhava of Mesha or Aries Rasi, transit Jupiter residing in Libra, getting the aspect of Saturn, and now looking at the same house that has been spoiled earlier. So the chances for this transit Jupiter to do something pertaining to the 2nd house from Rashi Lagna and 12th house from Chandra Lagna is close to 0. Now let's go and look at transit Saturn. Transit Saturn will be in Sagittarius, which is the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th house from Rashi Lagna, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, oh my gosh, 8th house from Chandra Lagna. First of all, we'll start from Rashi Lagna. From Rashi Lagna, transit Saturn is in the 10th house, okay, owned by Jupiter. Jupiter is already weak, so the 10th house is weak. That tells you that the native, whatever the native is going through pertaining to her career, will be a little bit challenging. Now let's go and look from Chandra Lagna. From Chandra Lagna, transit Saturn is in the 8th house. That means this native has just started going through the Ashtama Shani. The impact of Ashtama Shani will be clearly visible for this native as long as transit Saturn is in this particular house, that is approximately December 2019. That's when Jupiter Antardasa is completing and Saturn Antardasa is starting. So for this particular native, until the end of December 2019, she'll be going through the Ashtama Shani, and Jupiter being the lord of the 1st and 10th house, it will be very challenging for this particular native when it comes to the self-confidence and career and and with a natal Jupiter residing in the sixth house, that career is also co-joined with employment conditions. So overall, for this particular NATO in the year 2018, things will be extremely challenging, and I would like to say the word extremely challenging. And even she may not have she may not have proper mental happiness too. Let me wait and see what exactly happened. I will approach the person in 2019 and see what exactly has happened. Okay, let us now start analyzing the third example. This in this example, what you see is that the multiple planets, you don't see Saturn. So when it comes to Graha Yuddha, if Saturn is one of the multiple planets, then by default Saturn is the winner. Now that we do not have the Saturn, we have to go and look at the sequence of winners in Graha Yuddha. The sequence is Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. So, if Saturn is there, Saturn is the winner. If Saturn is not there, then Jupiter is the winner. If Jupiter is not there, then Mars is the winner. And if Mars is not there, then Venus is the winner. If Venus is not there, Mercury is the winner. So, what you have to see is that since Saturn is not here, Jupiter is the winner for this in Graha Yuddha. So this particular house, the 12th house, is controlled by Jupiter. So what you need to see is what is the relationship between Jupiter and the house lord Venus. That's a neutral. So we don't need to worry about that part of it. Now that Jupiter is the winner in the Graha Yuddha, let's start looking at the relationship between Jupiter and the other planets. Like Jupiter is the friend to Moon and Mars, and Jupiter is the enemy to Mercury. Jupiter is in, okay. So Moon, Mars, Sun, Moon, and Mars are friends. The only enemy is Mercury. So what is Mercury? Mercury is the 8th house lord and the 11th house lord. So when it comes to the 11th house, which is the house of desires and labhasthanamo, the NATO will have some problems. That's because the Jupiter is the Mercury is residing in the house where Jupiter is ruling that house. Now let's go and look at the other planets one after the other. Mars is the lord of the first and the sixth houses. First house is Tanusthanamo and sixth house is Rogasthanamo. Since Mars is residing with a friend Jupiter, we don't need to worry about that part of it. And the Sun is the lord of the 10th house. That indicates that the NATO has what you call the so-called management related career. Somewhere in her lifetime, the NATO is going to have some sort of a management related career. Then Moon is the lord of the 9th house. That's the Dharmasthanamo and Bhagyasthanamo. And Moon is also Matrakaraka. Because Moon is the 9th house lord and Moon usually is the Matrakaraka, the chances for this need to go into teaching, like taking care of in either in teaching or hospital industry, where as a nurse or a caretaker, senior citizen caretaker, something like that, pertaining to the emotional of the mother's emotional impact, all those things will be one of her career. And then comes Jupiter. Jupiter is the lord of the second and fifth houses. Second house is Dhanasthanamo and Kutumbasthanamo. So and the fifth house is Putrasthanamo and higher education. So when you look at up till this point, what you notice is Sun is the 10th house lord, so something pertaining to management is sure to be there. And then Moon is the 9th house lord, so whatever her earnings will be related to Moon, and the profession, because moon is the mother Matrikaraka, or has a motherly instincts. Usually the profession will be something pertaining to teaching or health medical industry, like a nurse or a seen healthcare taker. Now Jupiter is the second house lord, which is the dhanasthanamu, so Jupiter is education. So this tells you that for sure the native is going somewhere related to education, some in industry, education industry. Now because Mercury is 8th and 11th house lords, and we don't need to worry about Mercury at this point. Anyhow, whatever happens for this native, it is for sure that she will be having some sort of an issues pertaining to Labhasthanamu. Okay, now where are all these planets co-joined? All the planets are co-joined in 12th house. 12th house deals with foreign travels. So what's the possibility for this native is pertaining to Sun. With the help of Sun, Moon and Jupiter, there is a possibility for this native to go abroad. And now comes the most important part, is the 10th house lord is Sun. Where is Sun? Sun is in what do you call, Nicha, or debilitated. Sun is debilitated, Nicha. So whatever the management techniques or whatever the career that she wants to pursue pertaining to management, because Sun is debilitated or Nicha, she would not able to make it. This is what you see right now. Now let me go and see another important thing is Mercury is residing in the house owned by Venus, and Venus is residing in the house owned by Mercury. That's the Parivartana Yoga. So when you look at Venus and Mercury, the relationship between them, Venus and Mercury are best friends. So the 12th house lord is residing in the 11th house and the 11th house lord is residing in the 12th house. So that tells you that the 12th house lord residing, because the 12th house lord is residing in the 11th house, the Labhasthanamu, or whatever the financial gain that the native will have, is mostly pertaining to the 12th house, which is foreign travels or settling abroad and then making money. Now before I go further, let me tell you a little bit about this native. Remember I said the 5th house lord is Jupiter, and Jupiter is in the 12th house, the being the winner, and Jupiter is the 2nd and 5th house lord. This native has masters in mathematics, MSc in mathematics, and if I think she even have a MEd, if I remember correctly. No, she just has a master's in mathematics. She's unmarried. She comes from a middle class family, and according to her, there are a lot of financial problems in her family currently. Because she is unmarried, all the financial problems and the family status is pertaining to her father, based on her father. So at this point, she's unmarried. That's what we need to keep in mind. Let me go a bit detail and see how these multiple planet impact will be. Now let us go and look at more in detail about these multiple planets. What you notice here is that when you look at the inclination of these planets, the inclination of Sun is 0 degrees. That means in Libra. First of all, it is in Nicha. If it is in Libra, it is in Nicha. Nicha or debilitated. Because it is 0 degrees 4 minutes, that means the Sun is in Rashi Shandhi. That's the biggest disadvantage for this native. Sun, the 10th house lord, being in Rashi Shandhi and also being in Nicha is the biggest disadvantage for this native. Now, so and the fortunate part is Sun is co-joined with its friend Jupiter, and even Jupiter, Mars and Moon, all the three are friends for Sun. So Sun is co-joined with all the three friends. So that's the biggest advantage. Even though that Sun is in Rashi Sandhi and had a Nicha, it is co-joined with its friends. That's a good thing. And the next comes the next one, but unfortunately Sun is residing in the house owned by its enemy Venus. So that's another disadvantage. So when you see to the 10th house lord, see how bad the 10th house lord is here for this particular native. The 10th house lord is Nicha, the 10th house lord is in Rashi Shandhi, the 10th house lord is residing in the house owned by its enemy, and The positive side is the 10th house lord is co-joined with the friends and the 9th house lord, the 2nd house lord, and the 8th house lord and the 6th house lord. So basically, for this particular native, even though the career, pursuing career is a challenge, but still there is a possibility for this particular native to have some sort of a career. It's a very challenging for this particular native to have a steady career because of sun. Now let's go and look at the other planets. If you look at it, moon is in 24 degrees, Mars is 20 degrees, Mercury is 24 degrees. So moon, Mars and Mercury are very close to each other. Whichever way you look at it, for moon, Mars is a friend but Mercury is a neutral. So the 9th house lord, the 1st and 6th house lord, the 8th and 11th house lord are fine. Now comes the most important is the planet that is ruling that house, that won the Graha Yuddha, is Jupiter. Jupiter is 1 degree 02 minutes. As I said earlier, Jupiter is now in Rashi Sandhi too. So that's our biggest disadvantage for this native, is Jupiter is in Rashi Sandhi. So Jupiter is the 2nd house lord and the 5th house lord. So when it comes to 5th house higher education, the native might have gone through some sort of difficulties to complete her higher education. When it comes to the 2nd house, which is the Dhanasthanamu and Kutumbasthanamu, as I said earlier, the native is from a middle class family in India, and according to the native, the native's family is currently going through a lot of financial problems, right from, as far as I understood, since the native has started understanding the family situation, what she noticed is that the family is going through a lot of financial problems. That is all because your Jupiter is in a Rashi Sandhi. And the next one you have to see is here, how bad is Jupiter. Because Jupiter is in a Rashi Sandhi, you have to assume that the Jupiter is in is swinging between Virgo and Libra. If Jupiter is in Virgo, that means the owner is Mercury, and that means Jupiter is staying in the house owned by its enemy Mercury, right? But the other part is Jupiter is also co-joining with Venus, and Venus is neutral for Jupiter. That's the first thing. If Jupiter is in Libra, then it is staying in the house owned by its neutral Venus, but it is co-joined with its enemy Mercury. So either of the way, the Jupiter has some sort of affliction. That's the primary reason why the native is currently going through all those problems as explained earlier. So for the year 2018, let's go and look at the Vimsottari Dasa and how it is going to impact the native. In 2018, first of all, the Vimsottari Dasa Mahadasa is Saturn running, and it is all the way till 2023. And in the 2018, what you see is that Saturn Mahadasa, Mars Antardasa or Rahu Antardasa. So the Mars Antardasa is in the first 4 months. So Mars is the 1st and 6th house lord. So, and Saturn being the 3rd and 4th house lord residing in the 3rd house, and the transit Saturn will be coming and touching the 2nd house, which is the Dhanasthanamu and Kutumbasthanamu. Whatever the native is going through, it keeps going. It will be like that only, continued until April 2018. Then comes Rahu Antardasa. Rahu is in the 1st house, having a direct aspect on the 7th house owned by Venus, and Venus is the 12th house lord, is the 7th and 12th house lord residing in the 11th house. So Rahu, and because for Saturn is the 4th house lord and Saturn is residing in the 2nd house, and this is the Saturn Mahadasa, there is a possibility for this particular native to get married during Saturn Mahadasa and Rahu Antardasa, that is starting April 2018. Now let's see what the another slow moving planet, Jupiter. Transit Jupiter will be in the 12th house at least until 2018 July or August, something like that. All the way up to that point, transit Jupiter will be in the 12th house, touching the multiple planets that are existing there, where natal Jupiter is the winner of that house. So Jupiter is now here very strong because the transit Jupiter has co-joined with the natal Jupiter, and Jupiter is the lord of the second and fifth houses, and the transit Saturn is residing in the second house. Saturn Mahadasa is running, and Rahu is the uh, Antardasa looking at the seventh house. And if you look at it, Rahu is transit Rahu is also in the ninth house. Because transit Rahu is also in the ninth house, it all combines to say that for this particular native between April 2018 till end of 2018, that is December, close to December 2018, the chances are very high for this particular native to get married. This is based upon the transit analysis of the slow moving planets and the impact on the multiple planets. Let's hope and see, let's wait and see what exactly is going to happen in 2008 for this particular native.